Oh yeah, that's Trashy. A podcast by Christopher J. Garcia from Klaus at Gunpoint and Office Supply Publishing. It's a rite of passage, really. At midnight, some Friday or Saturday, you go to a movie theater. They still have those, you know. And usually you wait in line, and then you get seated. And there are people dressed weird. Carrying bags, usually. And then the thing starts. And everyone has a role to play. Some people know every line. There are people who call out things in response to the movie. There are in-jokes, some of which theater-specific. So that if you're in, say, the Varsity Theater in Stanford in 1990... it would be different than being in, say, the UA in San Francisco in 1994. Ask me how I know. There are points where you throw toast. There are points where you get up and dance in the aisles. For generations, the Rocky Horror Picture Show has been the closest thing to a coming-of-age rite as cinephiles had. But of course, there are lots of questions to it. Is it trashy? Is one. And I'm going to argue yes. And that's a good thing. But it's also important. And not just in a so bad it's good way. But let's go back to the beginning. And a dude named Richard O'Brien. Now, Richard O'Brien was an actor. And he had a very particular look. Tall, kind of gaunt. But he also only got sporadic roles throughout the early 70s. And so what he did was he actually started writing songs. He had a hell of a voice. And eventually he started to work with these sort of very specific genre concepts based off of 1950s and 60s science fiction. And not just American science fiction. And in fact, I would argue more like traditional British science fiction. You'd see stuff like Michael Powell, even the Hammer films. And these sort of things that bubbled up. You know, Day of the Triffids is a great example. Now, O'Brien wrote songs. And one of the earliest was Science Fiction Double Feature. And Science Fiction Double Feature as a song is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It is establishing the genre theme of the entire piece. And it's perfect at it. Michael Rainey was ill the day the earth stood still, and he told us where we stand. Perfect. The whole thing references all of 1940s, 50s, and 60s science fiction. Mostly British, but American too. It puts you in the mood and mode that you're going to be operating in for the next hour and 40 minutes, I think. And he wrote various numbers, and eventually it became a stage play. Now, one of the best theaters in the history of London is the Royal Court Theatre. And in the upstairs, there was a more experimental space. I sort of see this as like the old Public Theater in New York, where there was the main stage, which was slightly experimental, but there were the two smaller stages that they operated that were more where the great experiments happened. We do have to remember, Hair was an experimental musical. My mind was blowed when I realized that. Now, the general genre-specific story, the actual plot, because there is a plot, is actually fairly simple. There's a mad scientist who happens to come from outer space, who has taken up root in Denton. He happens to be an alien, and he has a group of other aliens who work with him, some of whom are unsatisfied with their positions. He has decided to play God, and has created his own little plaything. Two tourists happen by. They end up intertwined with our mad scientist. Eventually, one of the servants of the mad doctor turns on them, has been in contact with the sort of mother base, who eliminates them, and the rest of them return home. That's a very simple story. But that's not the piece. If you told that, I don't think it would be a trashy film. But the way they approached it was intentionally I don't want to say provocative, but it was. But there's more to it. And part of it is operating in this realm that is, in fact, trashy on purpose. Because if I told you the plot of the film was a cross-dressing mad scientist from transsexual in the galaxy Transylvania comes down to Earth, creates a sex toy for himself after having removed portions of the brain of a former lover of one of his servants, and then two people come and visit, young lovers, and various sexual shenanigans happen, leading to one of the other two of the servants getting commands that they are going to return home and, of course, kill our mad scientist and his creation, at the same time as we learn about the misdeeds of our mad scientist, Dr. Frank N. Furter. That sounds like something that John Waters could even get behind, if you told it without the science fiction elements. What's interesting is that a lot of the folks who were in the original stage production actually moved over to the film version. Richard O'Brien, who wrote it, and also appears as Riff Raff, one of the most memorable characters. I believe Trisha O'Quinn as Magenta was in the original one. I'm not 100% sure about Little Nell, who I got to meet back in the New York days. She was really, really cool. I never got to meet John Sex, but they were very close, apparently. But Tim Curry as Frankenfurter is really the most important acting character in it, for a bunch of reasons. One, he has to carry the weight of the story while also giving it the trappings of the whole gender ambiguity, turning back and forth, as well as just performing the hell out of every song. And he does. He always does. What's interesting is that Rocky Horror, for better or worse, was the first time a lot of people came across the term transsexual. And that, at that time, almost unknown, at least among the general population. Transvestite, and the song Sweet Transvestite, of course, is one of the big show-stopping numbers. That was, a lot of time, the first person who heard the word transvestite. No, that was the more preferred terms, and it's sort of not appropriate today. But it's folding in, transsexual Transylvania. It's folding in the two ideas. This gender variant story within a science fiction or horror context. And we get views of love scenes between males and other males. We don't get one. I don't believe we have any. We get some hint of Columbia Magenta, and maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part. But it really doesn't come in as profoundly as we know that male on male happens. We get, not only does Frankenfurter get with Janet, played by Susan Sarandon, and the last time I really found her interesting in a movie. I'm not a big Susan Sarandon fan. Oh, I guess Bull Durham. But then we get Barry Bostwick, who I adore, one of the finest television actors in history, and his performance with Frank is also great. Like, it's giving you a view at the time, which would have been somewhat shocking. We had gone through the 60s. This is 1974, was when it was filmed, which happens to be my exact birthday. And it's really interesting in that it's giving you, in every element of it, it is giving you all the markers. You get a wonderful scene where Frankenfurter is giving a public address thing, and the microphone is there, and it reminds me of every 1940s and 50s microphone you ever see in a movie. And is dressed, of course, in the scrubbed schmuck of the day, but is also wearing pearls. You have that wonderful scene where you have the RKO radio pictures, which I still don't know what the fuck a radio picture is, overlooking the pool where the final floor show happens. The floor show where everyone is dressed in corsets and whited face. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. One of the most, I think, overlooked elements in it is the narrator, played by Charles Gray. Charles Gray was a big deal at that point. He was a Bond villain. He was instantly recognizable. And I believe traditionally in the play, the narrator is also Dr. Scott, Dr. Fawn Scott, I should also say. And sometimes Eddie, but I'm never 100% on that. The one version of the Rocky Horror Show I've seen had Dr. Scott and Eddie played by the same character. But I don't remember. This is 20-something years ago. I don't remember if the narrator was also there. But the narrator has a really impressive role in this. They, in a way, are guiding us through the film. Without the narrator, the film could make a lot less sense. I'm about to say something that may be controversial to some of you. Trashy does not equal bad. And I'm not talking moral judgment, I'm talking an aesthetic judgment. Everything the Rocky Horror Picture Show does, it does incredibly well and gets its point across. It works magnificently. But it's working within a language of B films. A language of an expanding sexual consciousness. A language that is intentionally provocative at the same time as being non-exploitative. I can go back and forth on that last bit, but I really think it's not. I think it's a celebration. I really do. I think that is what makes Rocky Horror so impressive. Because on its surface, it's saying, at least it seems like it would be saying, hey, come look at the freaks. But what it's really saying, in my eyes, is no matter what kind of freak you are, and we're all freaks, I think really that's kind of the point of it, these are areas that you can be a part of. You are not excluded from these grand stories because of whatever you happen to be. I think that's an excellent message. And do I think a lot of people came away with that? Less so from the film, more so from the fandom. And that's where it gets really interesting. Because the fandom made it explode. Because people could find a home for themselves, no matter who they were, no matter what they did, again, for better or worse. They had a place within Rocky Horror fandom. There were casuals, there were hardcores. There were people who became part of the stage show. And there were people who just showed up on Saturday nights and watched the movie over and over again. There are still places that show Rocky Horror, if not weekly, monthly. And they do a lot of special shows. I used to see it at Bacon. I'd stop in every year for at least a while. In the context of this podcast, though, yeah, I think it's trashy. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a great movie. Really intelligently told. Really well shot. Tongue-in-cheek camp. And I hate using the word camp here because camp has a connotation that I don't like. Because I feel like camp is, in essence, exploitative, again. And I don't think this is really an exploitation flick. I love the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I need to show it to the kids at some point. I've played the Time Warp for them. I think in time we will realize exactly how important Rocky Horror was for Gen X. We're starting to see it already. I really think that the 2000s explosion of musicals and the success of things like Chicago, La La Land, all of those, part of it is the fact that Gen X was steeped in this sort of expansive musical concept. And we wanted that celebration again. I really feel that. Thank you for listening to Trashy. Next time, I'm going to go into my realm, as it were, and we're going to move away from films and go to a little thing called radio. Yeah, we're finally going to talk about Howard Stern. Because, yeah, that guy is trashy. Trashy is written, recorded, edited, all the did by Christopher J. Garcia. And remember, if you hate yourself for loving it, it's probably trashy.